Hey everyone, welcome back to Infinite Podcast. I'm your host, revved up as always to dive into today's brain bender with my pal Simon. So Simon, we're getting our hands dirty today in the world of artisan code crafting. It's this idea that coding isn't just hammering on keyboards. It's a craft, much like woodworking or pottery. Now I'm torn between practical code that works and the pursuit of coding nirvana. What's your take on slinging perfect bed of code in our fast-paced tech scene?
Perfect code in a fast-paced world. That's like a unicorn, Joe. Mythical. I say ship it, then fix it. Who's got time to knit software like grandma's sweater? Get it out the door and patch it on the fly. That's the real world, buddy.
Uh, I hear you, Simon, but think about it. There's got to be a line, right? Shipping fast is cool and all, but what if that rush job tanks a Mars rover? Sometimes, the stakes are super high, man. In those cases, quality can't just be an afterthought. It's critical. Plus, isn't slapping on patches kind of costly in the long run?
Well, sure, Joe, you've got a point. Look, when you're sending stuff to Mars, no argument, details matter. Gotta dot those I's, cross those T's. But for most of us old earthbound coders, it's like, let's not get stuck polishing the silver while the house is on fire, right? Strikes me as ideal to find a middle ground. Quality? Yup. Obsessing over perfection? Nah, let's be real. Balance is key.
Yeah, balance. That sounds sensible. But hey, I gotta wonder, Simon, where's the real sweet spot? Is there a formula or is it more of a gut feeling thing when deciding how polished a piece of code should be before you, actually ship it?
Joe, it's kind of like cooking. There's no perfect recipe here. It's all about taste. If it's a high-stake project, yeah, take your time, finesse it like a five-star meal. But for the everyday stuff, just, make sure it's edible. It's about knowing your diner. Is it a food critic or just a hungry teenager? That's your sweet spot right there.
True that. Cater to your audience. Nobody needs gourmet for a snack. Keep the fancy tricks for the big shots. Just don't serve up a half-baked app as a full meal, right?
Hey there, folks. Just tuning in? Well, you've jumped right into a tasty talk on code. So, we're chewing over this whole idea of artisan code crafting. It's kind of like making code super fancy and top-notch. But, here's the deal. Joe and I are dishing out whether we need that gourmet code or if we can settle for, say, more of a fast food style, quick and satisfying. We agree it's all about who's going to eat it up in the end. Super crucial project? Slow cook that masterpiece. Everyday job? Serve it up quick. Just don't give them food poisoning, you know? Keep it digestible. That's our motto.
Oh, sorry, Simon. Gotta admit, I spaced for a sec there. You're telling me they're treating code like fine dining now? Artisanal and all? Huh. That's kind of wild, but makes sense in a way. We've seen craftsmanship in all sorts of fields, so why not coding, right? Just never really thought about it like that before. It's definitely food for thought, but no matter how you slice it, gotta make sure it still hits the spot for whoever's using it.
Right, so it's like some folks are totally into this whole artisan thing, treating their code like a craft. But I gotta ask, don't we run the risk of, obsessing over the wrong things? Like making code aesthetic instead of effective?
Yeah, man, Simon. Focusing too much on the art part of artisan might just muddle things up. It's like when fighters focus on flashy moves instead of solid fundamentals. Looks cool, sure, but does it knock somebody out? That's what counts in the ring, and in code, it's gotta work first.
Yeah, so when you think about it, the whole point is solving problems, right? Fancy code, that's all, polished but doesn't get the job done, is kind of like a chocolate teapot. Looks sweet but melts under heat. It's critical to keep in mind why we're coding in the first place. It's got to be robust, maintainable, accessible, and real world ready. That there's the meat and potatoes, don't you think? Cool aesthetics, just gravy.
Hey there, folks, just jumping in. Well, you've landed on Infinite Podcast amidst a real saucy debate. We're marinating in the concept of artisan code crafting. It's like this idea of treating code as a craft, right? Where every line is carved with care. But we've been slicing and dicing, whether that's practical or just pie in the sky. So here's the gist. We reckon it's all about balance, like serving up a meal, you know? For the high-stakes stuff, fuss over each flavor. But for everyday coding, we say keep it hearty and filling, not just pretty on the plate. Because at the end of the day, folks want to chew on something that satisfies rather than just looks gourmet. That's the meat and potatoes of our chat, getting the job done tastefully without overcooking it. Keep it robust, maintainable, and yeah, ready for some real-world action. And if you missed any bites, remember, you can always rewind.
Hey there, podcast pals. If you're just tuning in, here's the skinny. We've been chatting about artisan code crafting, which is like taking code to a whole new level of craftsmanship. But does that really jive with needing to crank out projects at, warp speed? So we've been jawing over finding that sweet spot where your code ain't just fast food style, slapped together and kind of meh, but it also ain't like this fancy five-star dining experience that, well, no one really needs for everyday apps. The bottom line, it's got to work well, got to be maintainable, and not break the bank or the timeline. So yeah, don't forget to hit us up with your thoughts, because we're all about that back and forth on Infinite Podcast. All right, let's chomp down on the next topic.
Totally, Simon. Crafting code with a balance, that's the golden ticket. We want to build software that's like comfort food, reliable, and enjoyable. But hey, who says it can't have a pinch of flair? What do you folks think? Can coding be an art without throwing practicality out the window? Hit us up. Let's keep this culinary code talk simmering.
So, sticking with the theme of things being robust and reliable, you wouldn't want your ship to start floating off course because someone skimped on cybersecurity. Speaking of which, have you heard about digital sea piracy? It's like hackers are boarding ships without ever touching a plank. They're finding ways to mess with boats, ships, and even ports from their couches. Crazy, right? Could make waves in global trade big time if it keeps up.
Yeah, digital sea piracy. It's wild to think about. I remember this one time I was on a fishing trip, just enjoying the quiet away from all the tech and gadgets of daily life. We had navigational equipment on board, simple stuff. But then, out of nowhere, the GPS started glitching, showing us way off course. At first, we thought it was a joke, but nope. Turns out there was some kind of local interference messing with our systems. And it got me thinking, if that little blip could throw us for a loop, imagine what these hackers could do to a cargo ship or a bustling port with their fancy tricks. Just goes to show how much we rely on this tech being tamper-proof. Makes those salty sea tales look kind of tame in comparison, huh?
Okay, so this whole digital sea piracy gig, it's like having a treasure map where X marks the glitch, not the gold. I get we're reliant on tech and stuff, but shouldn't there be fail-safes? Like a backup compass or some old-school pirate know-how? These hackers, they exploit weak spots in the software that controls navigation, communication, you name it. Global trade at risk? Scary stuff. But then again, relying solely on tech without let's call it an analog life jacket, is just asking for trouble. There's got to be a better way to guard against these modern-day Blackbeards. Can't just shrug and hope for the best, right?
Yeah, Simon, exactly. Anchors away on guarding against these swashbuckling hackers. The thing is, many of today's ships are decked out with this integrated bridge system, right? It's like the ultimate captain's chair, all tech and touchscreens. But these IBS setups, man, they're ripe for hacking if not locked down tight. And it's not just about one ship going off course. Nah, we're talking massive supply chains at risk here. Like one pirate move in the digital world could create huge waves in the physical one. Ports, too. They've got these vast networks that control everything from cranes to customs. A breach there? Chaos, dude. Backups, delays. It costs a fortune. So, the industry is scrambling, patching holes faster than water coming through a busted hull, trying to make sure trade keeps flowing smooth as silk. People don't usually see cyber stuff as gritty or hands-on, but trust me, when it hits stuff like global shipping, it's as real as the wood under Blackbeard's boots. Kind of makes you miss the simplicity of just an X marks the spot on a scrap of parchment, huh?
Think about this. A hacker taps in, redirects a ship with one click. Boom, it's now an ultra-pricey, unstoppable missile with no off switch. Makes walking the plank look like kiddie pool stuff.
Yeah, that whole scenario takes remote control to a freaky level. Like, reminds me of this time back in college. I was into these virtual simulations, pilot training stuff, you know? I had this one simulation where, with one wrong input, my plane would just veer off. No biggie in a game, but that feeling of losing control because of a glitch sticks with you, man. It's kind of similar to what the maritime industry's grappling with. The tech's there to make life easier, automate things. But then again, when a single click can literally reroute a massive ship, everything gets real tense, real fast. It's like we've got all this power at our fingertips, and it's all fun and games until something zeroes in on the vulnerability. Suddenly, you're not in the driver's seat anymore. Makes you realize just how delicate that balance between control and chaos actually is.
So, I guess we're banking on everything just working out. But with digital sea piracy on the rise, that's a bit naive. We gotta picture this. Your fancy tech gets hacked. Yeah, it's slick. But now your cargo ship's veering off to who knows where, laden with goods that folks are waiting on. Or worse, you've got a rogue vessel on a collision course because some hacker got their jollies messing with the system. And let's not act like it's a once-in-a-blue-moon thing. These hacks are, what's the word? Prolific. You wouldn't leave your car unlocked with the keys in, so why treat a billion-dollar industry like it's immune to choppy cyber waters? Gotta get real about defense mechanisms, make 'em solid and foolproof. Not to be dramatic or anything, but the implications here, they're huge, like an iceberg looming over the Titanic huge. Better tighten up that security before we hit an oops of epic proportions.
I don't know, Simon. Comparing ships to cars? It's a bit different in scale and complexity, man. It's sort of like saying because I can toss a football, I can throw a Hail Mary in the Super Bowl. And let's not kid ourselves here. We may call it digital sea piracy, but slapping a Jolly Roger on these hackers glamorizes what's essentially cybercrime in deep waters. They're not swashbuckling adventurers, they're full-on threats to safety and commerce. Sure, things have been afloat so far, more by luck than anything else, if you ask me. It's time for maritime bigwigs to bounce up from their cushy captain's chairs and batten down the hatches on cybersecurity. Like before it gets worse and we see headlines about actual disasters at sea or ghost ships ferrying invisible cargo, a solid firewall is a good start, but you need layers upon layers of security protocols to prevent Davy Jones locker-type scenarios. Thing is, when you consider global trade hinging on this, our entire economy could be walking the cyber plank without a parrot in sight. It's that serious. We gotta swing back around and lock things tighter than, well, a barnacle on a hull. Just doing enough isn't gonna cut it anymore, matey.
Oh, and here's the kicker. Some of these hacking techniques, they're old school, like using phishing scams that pirates of the net have been pulling since the internet's been a thing. You'd think by now we'd have this whole cybersecurity thing down pat, but nope.
Oh man, speaking of old school, this whole cyber piracy mess reminds me of some epic software fails, like the classics you see in memes. Everyone loves a good bug glitch laugh, right? Just shows we're all human. Or at least, that our code is.
This reminds me of this time I was dabbling in code for my own little project. Nothing fancy, just wanted to create a reminder app, right? Simple stuff. Except, my miserably written loop turned the reminders into spam bots from hell. Set it up, went to grab a coffee, and come back to my phone blown up with like a gazillion notifications, all saying, remember to smile. So not only did I goof up big time with that infinite loop, but each ding was like a mini pirate cannon going off. I unintentionally orchestrated a small-scale notification armada against myself. It got me thinking about how even these tiny bugs can lead to something unexpected, sometimes hilarious, other times messy. Makes you appreciate those developers who save us from daily disasters with their debugging superhero capes, huh? And oh, doesn't that scene from HBO's Silicon Valley hit different when you've lived through your own personal Pied Piper compression algorithm meltdown? It's like you laugh but also cringe because it's kind of accurate. Bugs aren't just bugs. They're these comedic horror stories waiting to happen.
Honestly, Simon, not every software fail is a lighthearted oopsie-daisy, right? Like, remember the infamous Mars Climate Orbiter crash? Some coder mixed up metric with imperial, and next thing you know, that $300 million satellite is just space junk. Talk about an expensive bug. But then again, yeah, when it's harmless, those glitches can be comedy gold. Take any dev forum, it's overflowing with facepalm-worthy stories. Programmers accidentally creating self-aware AI jokes because they mucked up some lines of code, or video games where one tiny error turns a scary boss into, like a breakdancing fiend. And let's not forget those big screen moments that get coding so wrong, it's hilarious. Ever see someone in a movie hack by furiously typing random keys? Or enhance that grainy picture until it's like crystal clear from 2 pixels? Man, those get me every time because they're so far off the mark. It's comedic genius in its own way. These fails and fictions, yeah, they kind of mold public perception, making the daunting world of tech seem more approachable, even relatable. They mix dread and laughter, showing us tech's fallibility while giving us permission to chuckle alongside. It shines a light on the human behind the screen, bugs and all. But it's a fine line. Gotta keep things real enough to respect the craft, too.
Speaking of tech blunders, did you know there's an actual Hall of Fame for software bugs? Seriously, like a digital walk of shame. Makes you wonder if it's a badge of honor or the coder's cone of shame. Huh?
Uh, I mean, Hall of Fame or Walk of Shame, it's all about the legacy you leave behind, glitches included. Adds a whole new level to fame, doesn't it? Makes me want to code something horribly wrong just for the laughs and, historical footnote.
You know what? That's not a half bad idea. Imagine, like, years from now, some coder finds your deliberately wonky code and it's so epic, so masterfully botched that it just has to go down in history. Like they'd say, remember the app that was supposed to make coffee but somehow started cars instead? It's all about those quirks that turn into legends. Plus, those stories get us through the 3 a.m. bug fixes, right? And gotta say, clarity matters because, well, if we didn't have these fails documented, we'd keep making the same hilarious mistakes. So really, by laughing and learning, we're honoring their contributions and hopefully coding better for it. Yeah, totally intentional legacies are gifts to the future programmers.
Right, so about that gift to the future programmer story, it really is a thing, isn't it? By spotlighting these legendary mistakes, we're building a knowledge base in a way. Like, take this as an example. There was this game bug where characters would catapult off into space because of one wrong physics calculation. Side-splittingly funny, but also a cautionary tale. Game devs now probably have make sure players stay on Earth as step one in their, debug checklists thanks to that. And that's how these laugh-out-loud mishaps serve a bigger purpose. They're reminders to double-check your work. Details matter. Not just for functionality or preventing digital chaos. Nope. It's also like carving out your name in the annals of coding history. Do you want to be remembered for creating a smooth, seamless app, or the guy who coded an email software that signed off every message with "Love you, Kathex bye"? So, yeah, those Hall of Fame bugs, they keep us humble, remind us coding's as much art as it is science. Without them, we'd miss out on the human element in tech, which is what can bring a touch of the unexpected and absurd to our screens and keeps things interesting.
Well, okay, but here's the flip side. Not everyone's laughing at these bugs, right? Take developers who are like pouring their hearts into code. A tiny mistake shows up, and bam, it's public ridicule instead of praise for the other 99% of the project that's solid. And those legendary bugs? They might be hilarious, yeah, but they shape how non-tech people view software dev, kinda underestimating the complexity and skill involved. Like saying surgeons are just cutting stuff up. Not cool. Sure, let's chuckle at goofs, but also remember, making robust software is hard, and most of it works amazingly. So while we're celebrating bugs in the Hall of Fame, let's make sure it's not painting devs as absent-minded professors, because facts are, those bugs are the exception, not the rule. Just saying.
Sure, Simon, but gotta say, every legendary bug also has a hotfix hero story behind it. Unsung devs who did miracle work against the clock to patch it up. That's the real plot twist in these tales.
Ah, absolutely. For every catastrophic code calamity, there's a low-key legend behind a keyboard saving the digital day. Gives us all hope that when we royally screw up, redemption ain't just a pipe dream. But imagine the outtakes if bugs went unpatched. Now, what are some other facepalm moments in tech that left us shaking our heads but clapping for the heroes in the end?
So speaking of patching up things and saving the day, kind of ties back to our chat on cybersecurity at sea. It all circles around, right? When you think about it, having a backup plan's crucial, whether you're coding or cruising the ocean blue. On a vessel, if your tech fails because of buggy software or those pesky pirates we talked about, you gotta know what to do next. Seafarers worth their salt would turn to traditional navigation skills, like celestial nav with sextants, dead reckoning, maybe even just reading the waves and stars. They wouldn't just toss their hats overboard and give up. No way. Sailing speaks to a broader theme here, balancing tech with old-school know-how. Feels like something we should chew over a bit more, don't you think? How sailors and everyday folks can steer clear of navigational nightmares by prepping for when the screens go dark. And that includes the kind we deal out advice for on this podcast right now.
Diving deeper into navigational nightmares, think about what happens when a commercial ship's GPS system gets hacked. It's chaos. A determined hacker can reroute shipments, mess with inventory lists, or even disable crucial navigation systems, leaving a vessel adrift. Here's where maritime cybersecurity kicks in. Besides just teaching sea dogs how to use the stars for guidance, they should be trained in digital self-defense too. Ensuring secure encryption of communications, having physical backups of electronic navigation charts, and drills on switching to manual controls are all must-dos. For cruise vacationers, it's wise to be mindful of Wi-Fi networks on board. Don't click a slippery deck here. Keep personal info safe, because those digital pirates be lurking in unsecured waters. And let's zoom out on tech reliance overall. Classic seafaring knowledge shouldn't be kicked to the crow's nest just yet. Technology is fallible. Learning how the wind caresses the sails or waves kiss the hull is valuable and poetic sailor stuff. Not all who wander are lost, right? But better not be digitally hijacked either. Lastly, digital parenting while traveling? Fat child's play. Teaching kids good cyber habits on land will float just as well at sea. No sharing passwords like they're candy. Using screen devices less around water. Duh. And remember, your data's like treasure, so guard that chest like a savvy pirate. Aye aye?
Isn't it wild to think we protect data like gold doubloons these days? Cybersecurity at sea. Yeah, it's the modern treasure map where X marks the spot for hackers and scammers alike.
Yeah, and imagine pirates shouting, "R, give me your Wi-Fi password," instead of plundering for gold. Cybersecurity's the new swashbuckling adventure, matey.
So one time, right, I was on this fishing trip with my dad, big tech guy, loves his gadgets. We were relying on this fancy fish finder and GPS combo to nab the big one. Out of nowhere, our tech goes haywire, like compass spinning, screen flickering, total chaos. So there we are, feeling like proper old-timey explorers, because Dad's pulling out this ancient map he keeps stashed for such wicked times. And as much as we grumbled about going analog, that map led us right to a sweet spot, chock full of fish. It's like what they say about cybersecurity at sea or any kind of travel with tech. If you don't prepare for when things go south, or literally can't go south because your GPS is busted, you're setting sail into risky waters. And just as Dad knew, always have a backup, cyber or otherwise. Keeps you from being totally adrift, you know? The lesson rings clear. Sailing through life, be it actual oceans or the digital waves, means knowing how to navigate without a guiding satellite above. Staying vigilant, teaching that savvy to your crew, especially the kiddos, it sets everyone up for smooth sailing.
All right, but here's a thought. Are we leaning too hard on this nostalgic map and compass romance? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Modern navigation is leagues ahead of the old stuff. Sure, teach the basics. Always good to have in your back pocket. But it's kind of like, why ride a horse when you've got a sports car? And about teaching the kiddos cybersecurity, totally on board with that. But kids will roll their eyes at lectures, right? Gotta make it engaging, like turning password creation into a game of treasure hunting for the strongest character combo, or whatever. We should also, remember that modern problems need modern solutions, even if it sounds less adventurous and all Hollywood-style swashbuckling. Keeping our digital shipshape means staying updated with tech, not just falling back on ye old world methods because we're afraid of a little cyberstorm.
Yeah, Simon, you got a point. It's like we're romanticizing the past because modern tech does scare us a bit. All this hacking jazz shows we've got chinks in our digital armor, but doesn't mean we ditch the whole suit for chainmail, right? And kids, like trying to put socks on an octopus, getting them to care about cybersecurity. Gotta make it fun or it'll just zoom overboard. So instead of don't talk to strangers, it's like, hey, don't let cyber pirates swipe your treasure. Add a dash of adventure and suddenly it sticks. Oh, and speaking of sticking, here's a joke. What do you get when you cross a snowman and a shark? Frostbite, which has nothing to do with cybersecurity, but reminds us to keep things chill even when navigating these treacherous waters. But honestly, kicking it old school with maps and compasses, it's not about fearing the new, it's like wearing a life jacket. Hope you never need it, but damn glad to have it when the storm hits and your tech is taking on water. Make sense, buddy?
I bet if seagulls had Wi-Fi, they'd probably be better at online security than some humans. Just saying.
Oh, and speaking of birds, let's shift gears to the skies. Just like seagulls might beat us at cyberspace smarts, in actual airspace, pilots are dealing with their own tech transition, the move from analog to digital cockpit controls. So, talking about relying on modern tech, let's tackle these avionics software systems that pilots stick their trust in. You gotta wonder if they ever miss the old school knobs and dials, huh?
Yeah, this switch from analog to digital cockpits is like a pilot swapping out his paper flight manual for an iPad. The modern cockpit brims with these sleek computer screens, which are called the glass cockpit. Gone are the days of a gazillion tiny gauges and whatnot. Now pilots punch commands into a flight management system, FMS, and it's got all their maps, data, and system controls in one place. And here's where trust plays a leading role, because these avionics systems do stuff like automated navigation, making complex calculations at warp speed, and even taking care of landing in pea soup fog. So pilots really got to lean on their tech know-how and keep their cool when the software whispers, "I've got this." But let's not forget, the skies weren't always so techy. Back in the day, you had more mechanical controls, and pilots relied on raw skills. It was like driving stick instead of automatic. They had to feel the aircraft, kind of dance with the laws of physics. With digitization, well, some worry that hands-on mastery could get rusty without practice, because too much automation might just lure pilots into complacency. And we don't want no sleepyheads when cruising at 30,000 feet, right? So yeah, while these glass cockpits can make flights smoother and safer, they sure spark a fiery debate over how much pilots should cozy up to technology versus sticking to their maverick guns. Keeping both eyes wide open seems like the smart call.
Hey, glass cockpits sound slick, but autopilot won't laugh at a good old chicken or beef quip. Wonder when they'll code that in?
Ha! Yeah, imagine a pilot gets up and says, "Folks, the autopilot's flying us today, so I'm free for stand-up." Ever wonder why airplane food is called a meal and not a dare?
Could you imagine? But like getting back on course, this shift from hands-on flying to trusting software has its turbulence. Pilots gotta have confidence that the system won't suddenly decide to take a nosedive. And yeah, these avionics are smarter than your average bear, but take Sully Sullenberger, hero of the Hudson. His instincts and experience landed that plane, not some snazzy automated system. What if reliance on tech makes pilots lose their edge, becoming too cozy as passengers in their own cockpits? I mean, sure, you don't want them rusty on critical maneuvers when it hits the fan up there. So, while we're thankful for the tech that keeps air travel among the safest ways to traverse our blue marble, can we really afford to let fundamental flying skills go the way of the dodo? Seems like a dicey bet. Human judgment's got to stick around, with pilots ready to wrangle control back from their digital co-pilots when, not if, things go south. Scares me half to death thinking a future pilot's expertise might be asking the computer, have you tried turning it off and on again? Before bailing out with a shoot.
So, for our listeners just tuning in, we've been chatting about this big shift in the cockpit world from, the old school analog ways to these fancy digital systems, glass cockpits, they call them. Pilots now have to trust a bunch of screens and software to fly the big birds in the sky, which is pretty wild if you think about it. We're kind of mulling over how this tech can make things safer up there, but it also brings up some concerns about pilots potentially getting too comfy and maybe losing touch with their manual flying chops. It's all about finding that sweet spot between letting the autopilot do its thing and still being sharp enough to pull a Sully when you got to ditch your plane in the Hudson. And that's basically the gist of it. Balancing high-tech tools with keeping those essential pilot skills dust-free. We don't want future aviators just being glorified tech support, am I right? Especially not when you're coasting at 30,000 feet and need some serious know-how to navigate around trouble spots. No, have you tried turning it off and on again? Moments up there.
And those future aviators better not ask for a Wi-Fi password before landing gear.
Man, if the Wi-Fi's down, next thing you'll see is passengers flapping their arms trying to get some bars.
Heh, can you imagine? But seriously, when we're talking about tech in the cockpit, it's not just about keeping pilots' hands-on skills sharp. It's also about trust, right? Trusting your life to a bunch of ones and zeros is kind of intense. Now here's the kicker. During high-stress moments, all that fancy autopilot jazz, that's only as good as the pilot's ability to override it when things get dicey. We're cruising at Mach speeds in a metal tube. Heaven forbid the software glitches. Plus, what about those split-second life or death decisions? Crunching data's one thing, but interpreting it? That needs human intuition, something no algorithm has cracked yet. So even if avionics are reducing workload, making flights smoother and all, it's a bit naive to think they should take over completely. A pilot's gut feeling in stormy weather beats a computer's cold calculation any day. And let's face it, do we really want pilots less involved mid-flight? I'd argue that could even erode passenger confidence. People want to know there's a Top Gun ace up front, not just R2-D2 on cruise control. No offense to droids out there. Tech's tight. We love our gadgets, but flying a plane ain't like queuing up your favorite playlist or asking Siri for directions. No room for a whoops at 30,000 feet, and that's the real rub with this digital conundrum.
Speaking of trusting your life to ones and zeros, reminds me of this time I got myself one of those fancy electronic cars, the kind that practically drive themselves. So I'm there, cruising down the highway feeling all relaxed, letting the car keep up with the traffic flow, all smooth sailing. But then things get a bit hairy. Out of nowhere comes this massive thunderstorm. The sky's pitch black, rain's hammering down like it's Armageddon or something. And the car's sensors, they start freaking out because they can't handle the downpour. Heart's racing, palms are sweaty. I end up taking control back from my shiny tech wonder. Sure, the automated systems are smart and all, but in that split second, my old driving instincts kicked in, saving my hide. Trust me, learning to parallel park the good old-fashioned ways never felt so validating. Guess it's like the same deal when piloting a plane through rough patches. Technology's great until Mother Nature throws you a curveball. Then it's not just about trusting tech, it's also about how well you know your craft. You gotta navigate those storms yourself sometimes, even if your co-pilot's a computer.
And similar to your car versus storm fiasco, ever think how a tech glitch in the sky is probably 10 times scarier? No roadside assistance up there, my friend.
Oh, for sure. It's like being on a roller coaster where the safety bar pops open mid-loop. Yikes.
Yeah, so when it comes to these flying machines, the black box is basically the storytelling hero after a glitch turns things south. We've seen our share of whoopsies where software hiccups led to some, pretty harrowing moments in the skies. Think about that time when Gimli glider incident, yeah? Air Canada back in '83. A metric mix-up led to a fuel shortage mid-flight. and the crew had to glide that bird down to an old racetrack turned airstrip. Talk about sweaty palms, right? Or let's say the one everyone still talks about, 2009 Air France Flight 447. Hit turbulence, autopilot clicks off, and the sensors freeze up. Mixed messages going to the pilots, and bam, it was a series of tragic errors amplified by reliance on tech that at the end of the day just couldn't cope with the unexpected. So what do all these grim tales tell us then? Like in the aftermath, they shape our systems, because honestly, nobody wants a repeat performance. Software gets more robust. We tinker with protocols, essentially pulling lessons from wreckage, which is a bit morbid if you dwell on it, but it advances safety for those of us hitting the friendly skies, I guess. And here's what ends up in the recycling bin: complacency with tech and outdated practices. Today's pilots are trained to deal not only with clickety-clack dials, but also nuanced alerts from sophisticated system monitors. Every heart-stopping moment from the past informs how we approach automation today, clinging tight to the hope we'll outsmart the next storm, or at least not get too smug before it hits. Gotta be humbling, carrying the weight of past mistakes around in every line of code, making sure every algorithm keeps its guard up, even if it's sipping electrons up there. But hey, is foolproof ever truly foolproof? Kinda jolts you awake thinking about it, huh?
Just imagine that. History's horror stories written in code, haunting every flight, like ghost stories for pilots and programmers.
Absolutely. It's like each code carries centuries of cautionary tales. So, diving into black box lore, we extract crucial lessons that transform aviation safety. Take Turkish Airlines Flight 981. Way back in '74, a design flaw led to a cargo door failing mid-flight. Catastrophic decompression follows. This disaster stirred profound changes to door latch systems, and more broadly, to aircraft design scrutiny. Every crash, every mishap due to software that's flawed or misinterpreted by humans triggers an avalanche of checks and balances for future systems. The industry lives by the mantra, never again, right? But then comes along something like the Boeing 737 MAX crashes, a stark reminder that no matter how advanced we get, there's always new ground to cover. And standards, they hike up with each scare. The introduction of ACRS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, to monitor aircraft data, or FOQA, Flight Operational Quality Assurance programs looking at flight data trends to prevent repeats. But here's the thing, even with tech tight as a drum, you can't completely ironclad it against human error or Mother Nature's whims. Training gets a facelift too, pushing pilots to marry automation with core flying skills, keeping their game sharp in a cockpit where the line between human and machine navigation is, kind of blurry. So these ghostly narratives buried in the circuitry, they're not just spooky campfire stories. They are hard-won lessons mankind carves into the silicon brains of our aircraft, making trust in technology less a leap of faith, more a calculated gamble. Flip side, no ending yet, where everyone walks away unscathed, which brings a real heaviness to hitting enter on any new line of flight code. It's not for the faint-hearted or armchair enthusiasts.
It's wild, like teaching a metal bird new tricks, but every trick could be the difference between smooth sailing and, well, decidedly not.
So, diving a bit deeper into this black box business, it's like teaching not just the metal bird, but the whole flock, as in the industry, to dodge those air mines, right? And here's a thing that's super key: redundancy. We don't want a single failure point knocking out our skies. So like after every black box shocker, engineers hustle to layer backup systems tougher than a tank. Another biggie we learned is fail-safes gotta be smart enough to say nope when something smells fishy. Like diversified sensors checking each other, cross-monitoring they call it, to spot and squish glitches before pilots even need to intervene. Flight data monitoring? That's practically gospel now, tracking everything from fuel efficiency to flight path adherence, making tiny tweaks before they snowball into tomorrow's headlines. Constant learning loops, right? We're also crazy about dissecting sim scenarios. It's like living through rare disasters on a sunny afternoon. Gets real fast. Pilots face simulations of past nightmares, sharpening their instincts, so if deja vu hits, they're spring-loaded for action. Importantly, These lessons hammered into international protocols, airborne software advisory documents, strict development standards, stuff like RTCA DO-178C. If acronyms were engines, planes would have like a million of them. But each letter combo represents huge strides in software reliability. Still, with all the tech wizardry, none trumps pilot decision-making when push shoves. It's the failsafe that guards against complacency, even arrogance, of relying on seamless automation. Just makes you really respect the gravity, pun intended, of rolling out upgrades sky high. A robust system today, man, owes its bones to the black boxes of yesterday, molding an aerial tapestry weaved tightly, so Murphy's Law's got less room to play. It's kind of sobering and empowering at the same time. Crazy cocktail, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the skies become a classroom where every flight's a pop quiz with the highest stakes.
Reminds me of this one time I was flying out to a conference, and like heck, if it wasn't the bumpiest ride ever. We've got some intense turbulence, like the kind that makes you question your life choices. As we're bouncing around, I remember looking at the wings swaying and thinking about those black box stories. The ones where, despite all odds, the planes landed safely because of lessons learned from past failures. Maybe it was fate or just dumb luck I'd read up on these avionic heroes that day, huh? But right there, in my economy seat with zero control, recalling those stories, I don't know, it kind of brought a sense of calm. Like knowing the plane's tech and the crew were basically graduates from the harshest school you could imagine. Made those baby shampoos they call drinks a little more palatable, knowing each program running was a product of tough love from history's hard knocks. And then, after what felt like eternity with Mother Nature's own roller coaster, Captain comes on the intercom. What he said stuck with me. It was simple. Latest forecasts didn't show this weather gamble, folks, but we're trained for unexpected tests just like this. Right there was living proof of progress, that this wasn't just any pop quiz night in the classroom above. Our lives were riding on generations of passed-down lessons encased in rigid protocols and safety measures that began as tiny blips on doomed flights' black boxes. So like every scratchy voice reassurance through cabin static just echoes centuries of ghostly cockpit conversations guiding us home. That night I touched down, walking away unshaken, thankful for every unsung hero that logged data points, creating clearer skies from their stormier days. And trust me, no exam I've ever sat through gave such direct feedback as safe wheels down on a runway. It's crazy profound when you actually live through the whispers of those historical black box tragedies, like shadows beneath your flight path.
Bet those black box heroes never thought they'd be the guardian angels of my white-knuckle in-flight thrill ride.
And speaking of these intense, nerve-wracking moments, sometimes glitches take a turn for the absurd. Not every unexpected code wiggle leads to a white-knuckler. Some are downright hilarious. Mixed signals and crossed wires can make for some solid sky-high comedy. Let's talk about this one time. I heard it from a pilot buddy. Mid-flight across the pond, the in-flight entertainment system starts playing the emergency landing video. Out of nowhere, no warning, just straight into brace positions and life vests. Cue, crew scrambling, passengers bewildered, captain face-palming in the cockpit. Turns out, just a software snafu, not an actual need-to-panic moment. But there's nothing like a heart-stopping drill video to get your blood pumping over the Atlantic. What got me was how differently it played out, depending on where you're from. Some folks were instinctively looking for parachutes, because apparently that's a thing some cultures half expect. Others were cracking jokes, ready to audition for a, survival reality show. Just imagine the cabin scene. Say it's a diverse international crew dealing with this tech tantrum. The American co-pilots riffing sitcom-worthy one-liners over the PA. The French flight attendant gracefully assures everyone with a shrug that it's merely a petite erreur, while the German engineers already halfway through troubleshooting the IFE manual. And let's not even delve into the chaos if it'd been a bilingual error message. It'd be like Babel up in the airwaves. In the end, my pal said it made for some epic cross-cultural bonding. If nothing else, shared confusion's a great icebreaker. Just goes to show, the skies have their own version of slapstick. Software with a sense of humor, who knew?
Heh, It's like these planes need a software update from Clippy. It looks like you're trying to fly. Do you need help?
Ha! If Clippy popped up in the cockpit, I bet half the pilots would be reaching for the eject button instead of the help icon.
Oh, so that reminds me of this one time, right? I'm settling in for what's supposed to be a snoozer of a red eye. Suddenly, the seatbelt light starts doing this rave-worthy flicker show. It's like someone gave a toddler the switch and said, "Go nuts." Passenger next to me looks like he's envisioning every apocalypse movie ever made, and I'm just sitting there trying not to giggle. Yeah, bad time for my sense of humor to peak. Then, over the PA, you hear the flight attendant, bless her, she's going full improv mode, saying, "Fasten your smiles along with your seatbelts, folks. We're experiencing some high-altitude disco." Whole cabin lights up with chuckles. Tension deflates faster than a pop balloon at a birthday party. Turns out, just another confused wire throwing a party back in the system banks. But man, the unity that blooms from those few seconds of shared "what the heck" is pure gold. Honestly, those moments nudge everyone on board into this weird kinship bubble. It's like we're all part of an exclusive club whose membership fee is whatever sanity was left in our sleep-deprived brains. And seriously, I'll take a plane-wide giggle fest over the drone of engine hum any day.
Oh, for sure. Those in-the-moment saves from flight crew are unsung comic gold. Gotta hand it to them, turning what could have been a collective freakout into an airborne stand-up act. There's a treasure trove of these stories up there, man. Makes you wonder what other kinds of high-flying hijinks pilots and passengers have shared, all thanks to some cheeky lines of code trying to steal the spotlight.
Speaking of cheeky code, it's wild to think how far we're pushing the envelope with AI tech. The horizon looks all kinds of ethereal with the AI pilots they're cooking up, piloting systems so smart they could pretty much brew your coffee while landing the plane.
Yeah, So we're charging headlong into this wild blue yonder where tech and human skills are nearly indistinguishable. Like they've got AIs now that, seriously, can calculate scenarios faster than you can blink. This AI jazz is turning cockpits into a space more Silicon Valley than Wright brothers. But the big question here, Simon, is will these systems just assist, or are they going to take over? Pilots could morph from hands-on flyers to, like, in-flight IT specialists overseeing their digital co-pilots. And how's that going to play out with air traffic control, eh? Not to mention, what happens when an AI has to make those snapshot moral decisions under pressure? There's all this chat about ethics in robotics. Guess we'll need Asimov's rules of robotics plastered on every bulkhead soon. So, taking off from there, man, where do you see pilot roles evolving with this kind of tech in the mix?
You've got to figure with these AIs getting slicker by the minute, pilots are going to be more supervisors than anything, right? They'll need a hefty new skill set. Think split-second programming on top of their already stacked experience. And the data management side is going to explode. Huge amounts of flight info for them to sift through. It's not just about reading gauges anymore. It's interpreting what the heck the AI is up to as well. But we can't forget ethics. Mega important. Like when stuff hits the fan, who's really flying the plane? If an AI chooses path A over path B in an emergency, who are we trusting here? The code writers or the pilot watching it unfold? So these future pilots might be juggling ethical dilemmas alongside tech troubleshooting. The cockpits looking less like switches and dials, more keyboards and touchscreens. And all that's got to sync up nice and smooth with air traffic. Big changes ahead, no doubt. It's going to be fascinating, to be honest, watching how this plays out.
Totally get that AI is reshaping the game, but here's my pushback. We got to ask if it's really wise to give the keys to the kingdom to our silicon overlords. Like, even with mad progress in AI, there's this visceral part of flying that can't be hard-coded into ones and zeros. For me, there's a line, an intangible human factor, gut instincts, adrenaline responses that keep us from becoming too cozy with autopilot or auto anything. Pilots' adaptability, their ability to, read a situation beyond data points, that's gold. And then you have, like, accountability. It's clear as day when it's Captain Smith or Captain Zhang at the helm. But who do we side-eye when AI pulls something sketchy? You mentioned code writers, but will they stand trial for every turbulent incident? There's this murky legal airspace we ain't cleared for yet. Plus, mix in global perspectives on AI, a hefty cultural cocktail, right? Each country diving into these advancements has its own philosophies shaping how humans and technology share the cockpit. It could be streamlined or it could tangle into international spaghetti. Big tech's already got enough beefs without stirring supersonic travel into the pot. No question tech's galloping, probably gonna lap us soon. But maybe we shove a spoke in the wheel before handing over all control. Likely an unpopular opinion, but hey, someone's got to pump the brakes and ensure there's a real captain behind the AI captain badge. Call it professional paranoia or respect for high-altitude unknowns, but some decisions should stay sweaty-palmed human, hands down.
Oh, for sure. I mean, what if the airplane AI starts getting an attitude, huh? Like it refuses to fly on Mondays because it's got a case of the digital blues.
Ha! Can you imagine? Sorry folks, flight's delayed. The AI's on a coffee break and binge-watching Netflix. Adds a whole new layer to technical difficulties.
Well, think about it. With AIs in the cockpit, we're looking at redefining training for pilots, right? It's not just about flying, it's hardcore IT skills to diagnose AI hiccups on the fly, pun intended. And then, there's the trust issue. Pilots got to understand AI decisions as they happen. If something goes sideways and the AI is all silent treatment, you need that pilot intuition kicking in. Can't underestimate good old-fashioned human critical thinking. Plus, regulations got a lot of catch-up to do. The red tape on bringing AI assistance into the everyday is, well, thicker than grandma's lasagna layers. Takes time and loads of testing. So yeah, lots going on beneath the surface. We ain't just flipping a switch here. It's a whole new aviation landscape unfolding, slowly but surely.
You're spot on with the trust issue. I mean, pilots are basically going to need to double as AI whisperers, keeping that machine on a tight leash. It's like they'll be sitting there trying to decode whether the AI is feeling more like HAL 9000 or R2D2 on any given day. And no joke, the tech learning curve, steep as Everest for these folks. They've got to grapple with not just manual control, but also wrangling algorithms, the aviation equivalent of herding cats, if you ask me. Regulation-wise, oof, looks like we're gearing up for bureaucracy Olympics. And like you said, lots of testing, lest the autopilot decides to take an unscheduled scenic route because it found a cloud shaped like its favorite sheep or something. You never know, man. These smart systems sometimes have the darndest quirks.
Hey, at the end of the day, Joe, whether our AI co-pilots turn out to be sky-savvy geniuses or tech divas with attitude, this shift's going to be a journey full of turbulence, and not just the kind you need a seatbelt for. Keeps us guessing what'll come out of the cockpit next, right?
You got it. Always got to keep our minds on what comes next. Speaking of keeping a sharp lookout for unexpected issues, let's dip into something that's not in the clouds, but deep in the blue: marine cybersecurity. It's wild how the shipping world's had to evolve with all this tech flooding in. You've got vessels turning into floating data centers. Now they need firewalls as much as they do lifeboats. Back in the day, the biggest cyber worry was a virus-laden USB stick. Fast forward, and these ships are basically bristling with connected gadgets, all whispering sweet nothings through satellite links. It's like every ocean is a new wild digital frontier, huh? And with that high-tech horizon, you've got pirates going virtual. Cybersecurity's more critical than ever. But Simon, think about this. Modern ships don't just face typical network threats. They're pinging signals over vast, empty waters. I mean, if your Wi-Fi at home goes kaput, annoying, right? But out there, you can't just call up tech support while you're mid-Atlantic with a brick navigation system thanks to some hackers' Monday mischief. Plus, let's not forget, we're not just talking privacy or data breach. It's cargo, fuel safety, entire supply chains. Big stakes, pal, giant. So dive in here. Considering those unique challenges, how do you reckon these maritime moguls are beefing up their virtual armadas against these new age buccaneers?
I mean, seriously, Joe, if these ship honchos aren't upping their cybersecurity, it's a bit like sailing the Titanic with a screen door on the hull, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, they might as well send out engraved invites to cyber pirates with a "please hack us at your earliest convenience" note attached.
Yeah. So what gets me is how everything on these ships is wired up now. I mean, engines, navigation, cargo systems, all of it. A hacker gets in, and it's not just emails they're snatching, it's control over a megaton vessel. Insane. Back in the day, it was all about physical locks and like keeping an eye out for shady characters. Easy peasy. But nowadays, the threat's invisible. It sneaks in through satellite comms or infected ports. Digital ports, not seaports. Well, both, technically. So to keep their ships tight, companies are hiring these cyber sailors, so to speak, decking out their IT crews with tools to patch up vulnerabilities faster than you can say man overboard. Keeping this stuff airtight's a tall order when you've got as much tech as the Starship Enterprise floating around. But essential, right? Because if they don't, that's a lot of toys at risk. Not to mention people and, the whole supply chain thing.
Yeah, the stakes are sky high. But you gotta wonder if all this tech makes ships sitting ducks for savvy hackers. The ramp up in gadgetry is great and all, but slapping on patches like they're plugging holes in a dinghy ain't gonna cut it long term. Early on, cybersecurity was like a rusty bolt on a barn door, token effort at best. Now though, it's a full-blown arms race beneath the waves, with IT mariners hustling to outwit these digital Davy Jones types. Big question is, are they just chasing their tails here, huh? And another thing, satellite comms are pretty much hacker magnets. Those signals bouncing through the stratosphere are juicy targets. Plus, we've got fleets syncing up port operations worldwide. Feels like they're more backdoors than actual cargo holds. So while beefing up cyber crews is tight, companies need strategies with some real depth, not just reactionary quick fixes. You can't predict rogue waves, yeah, sure, but maybe you can better train your crew to sail through them without capsizing the databases. I'll go out on a limb here and say maritime cybersecurity needs its own Poseidon, some larger-than-life force to wrangle this hydra-headed beast of global proportions. Plug-and-play security solutions? A wake-up call. That ship sailed. We're navigating gnarly digital waters now, and the regular life jacket drills? Not as comforting when what you really need is a system that can handle icebergs 2.0.
Bang on, mate. Slap a cyber eye patch on every digital deckhand and make 'em walk the plank for any lousy passwords. Avast ye shipshape servers.
Aye, it's like the cyber seas have their own version of ghost ships floating around. Oddly enough, some of these reported hacks are stranger than fiction, and sure make Davy Jones' locker look like child's play.
You're not wrong, Joe. It's like, remember that freaky story where a ship's voyage data recorder got hacked? Like a black box on an airplane. Those recorders are sacred, so tampering with that stuff is hardcore. But it wasn't pirates or rival companies. It was the ship's very own crew messing around. They wanted to tweak the recorded hours to skirt some regulations. Talk about a backfire, right? Could have been spotted earlier with better monitoring or not giving everyone admin access, I guess. That makes me wonder, Joe, how do you think these bizarre hacks change the game for maritime security moving forward?
This takes me back to that time my buddy, let's call him Cap, tried to upgrade his boat with some fancy tech he barely knew how to use. Like he was all fired up about making things more efficient until one day we're out fishing and suddenly can't find our way back because the GPS is throwing a tantrum. Turns out his DIY install was great for streaming his tunes, but not much else. Hindsight? He should have learned to sail his tech before hitting open waters. Kind of like that ship tampering incident. It's all enthusiasm until you hit an unexpected squall. Going forward, it highlights, right, the need for proper know-how before handing over the keys to the kingdom. Understand your tools, restrict access, and hey, don't tweak what you can't handle. It sure makes for smoother sailing and, well, fewer chances of watching your own ship do circles because someone thought they were smarter than the system.
Honestly, Joe, just because your computer can run Minesweeper doesn't mean you shove it into a ship and call it navigation. Like this one time, these hackers locked up a ship's systems with ransomware mid-voyage. Kids stuff, like digital pirates holding the captain to cyber ransom. Kind of hard to throw treasure overboard to get 'em off your tail in the digital age, huh? Lesson here? Upgrade your defenses before you set sail in shark-infested waters. Don't wait for the bite marks to remember that, oh yeah, sharks are a thing. Cybersecurity ain't just sci-fi. It's as real as it gets on the high seas these days. Now thinking about it, this kind of mess should be making captains everywhere pretty darn nervous, right? I mean, preparation is key, and so are daily drills, because when things go belly up, your backups better have backups. Companies skimping on proper training and defenses are paddling the cyber canoe with a spaghetti noodle. It'll work for a hot sec, then snap. Goodbye, boat. What do you think, Joe? Ready to trade your motor yacht for an old-school dinghy with a map and compass yet?
Not quite ready to swap my tech for a compass, but stories like that make a solid case for nostalgically eyeing the sextants and sunstones, huh? Let's just say it's time to dust off the old pirate code. Trust no one at sea, especially not your own computer.
Talk about trust issues. Next up, they'll be giving the ship's AI a lie detector test before setting sail. Are you or are you not plotting a mutiny against your human overlords? Cue dramatic music.
Oh, hey there, new listeners.
Just diving into some pretty wild stories about the digital high seas. We've been chatting about these incredibly odd but true hacks where ships' systems got all mucked up by malware, like something out of a movie, right? There was this one ship where the crew tried to fiddle with their voyage data recorder. Big no-no, like trying to cheat on homework and ending up suspending your school account instead. And then, get this, some hackers threw ransomware at a ship's computer system while it was out and about in the ocean. Yeah, talk about bad timing. We're just cracking up over here, because it's like, who knew protecting yourself from cyber pirates was part of modern sailing 101? You got to beef up those defenses and be ready for anything, or you're sitting digitally duck-like, duckish, in duck-like fashion in sharky waters. So folks, stay tuned because we've got more on how the marine world handles their bites and barnacles. Trust me, it's smoother than a calm sea, at least when it comes to storytelling. Not so much if we're actually talking security protocols. Keep it locked here.
You know, Joe, this reminds me of a time back when I was a kid, like little tyke level. We used to go out on my grandpa's boat, nothing fancy, just an old fishing dinghy, really. And Grandpa, he had these wild stories about sea monsters and the like, but he also told me about navigating, right? About how sailors read stars when tech wasn't a thing. So this one time, we're out there, and he guides us using nothing but his compass and instincts, a total throwback style. And then our motor dies. Just pure silence except for the water lapping up around us. But Grandpa, cool as a cucumber, whips out the oars, has me steer while he rows us back to shore. No panic. It hits me now how that's kind of what these companies got to do with cybersecurity. Like having to trust your roots, your basic skills, when everything else goes haywire. Because sea monsters or not, be it tentacles or Trojans, you're going up against something unexpected. And sometimes it's your own simple knowledge that'll save your skin. It's a pretty tight metaphor when you think about it, huh, Joe?
Totally. It's like we've got to keep a good old rowboat handy in our cyber arsenal, just in case our high-tech engines give out and we need to paddle the old-fashioned way back to safe shores.
Man, imagine a world where every ship's captain has to double as a hacker-sniffing hound dog, sniffing out cyber threats with a telescope in one hand and an antivirus USB stick clutched in the other.
Ha! That's a crazy scene, man. Wouldn't surprise me, though, because it's a wild world out there. And we got captains turning into these cybersecurity warriors. It's intense. They got to be ready for anything, constantly on guard. It's like they're living in some sci-fi thriller, but with the ocean spray in their face and real danger lurking in the digital depths.
You know, this brings to mind that time my phone got hacked. Nothing major, but still shook me up. I was just sitting there, thinking everything's dandy. Then boom, contacts gone, photos scrammed, like a digital cyclone had blasted through. Messed with my head, mate, because, we rely on these gadgets. A bit too much, maybe. Had to go back to basics for a week, writing things down, using an actual map. Felt like I'd time jumped to 95. it taught me a valuable lesson. Gotta balance our tech love with a healthy dose of caution. Maybe mariners can take a leaf out of that book. Sure, steer your ship with the latest gear, but remember how to navigate if your toys bail. You know? Keeps you afloat in every sense of the word.
Absolutely, falling back on analog can be a real lifesaver. In the sea of modern maritime tech, it's those Neanderthal-style basics that could mean the difference between smooth sailing and digital shipwreck. What do you all think? Are we too dependent on our gadgets? Could going back to basics make us safer at sea? Let's ponder on that.
And now, pivoting from the nitty-gritty of marine cybersecurity to the lighter side of things, because we all need a laugh between the serious chat. Sailors have been through it all, and some of their "it's not a drill" mix-ups are just comedy gold. So, picture this. Captain thinks he's got another drill on his hands, starts doing his routine checks real casual-like, but lo and behold, someone's actually commandeered the PA system, playing Rick Astley's greatest hits on loop. The crew can't tell if it's a prank or if they've been hit by the grooviest hacker alive. It's chaos with a beat. Keeps things spicy at sea, right, Joe? And a giggle is as good as a life raft when the pressure's on. What's the funniest alarm false moment you've heard about?
Yeah, so I knew this one sailor, let's call him Captain Jack, right? So Jack's chilling on the bridge when the engine room calls up in a panic, thinking they're being hacked. Lights are blinking, weird noises, the whole shebang. And Jack rushes down, ready for battle, only to find out it's just Larry, the new guy, who spilled his coffee all over the console. It's like Larry couldn't tell Starboard from his coffee cup if his life depended on it. They had a good laugh, and it turned into a legend on board. Stuff like that just keeps morale up, even showed them some vulnerabilities they hadn't thought of. So good old clumsy Larry kind of saved the day, unintentionally. It's those lighthearted moments you kind of cling to, ain't it?
Ha! Classic Larry, adding a splash of chaos to the mundane. But not every false alarm is just spilled coffee. Some are more creatively absurd. So there's this tale, Joe, where some crew thought they were under attack because the ship's systems started acting wacky all by themselves, like full-on sentient AI revolt stuff or something. And everyone's at their battle stations, ready for doomsday. Turns out, a dang seagull had plopped itself on a sensor outside. Yeah, man, a bird. Can you imagine those salty sea dogs chuckling when they caught that feathery hacker red-handed? Bet it was like just watching the gull commandeer an entire vessel without even pecking a single button. We gotta admit, sprinkling humor into those pulse-racing moments is like a flavor enhancer for team spirit, even gets the gears turning for better security. 'Cause next thing you know, they're running drills for bird invasions. Keep your friends close and your anti-seagull protocols closer, right?
Ha! Forget spyware. We better start worrying about spy birds. Now, who's got the task of training these seagulls to steer clear? Any takers?
That's a job description no one saw coming. A seagull security officer. You gotta imagine it'd be like, qualifications include expert in bird law and proficiency with breadcrumbs. But for real, who's gonna step up? Seems like you'd need the patience of a saint and the reflexes of a cat. But hey, it's all hands on deck with this wacky stuff. So Joe, what's your take? Ever had any animal antics throw a wrench in your plans?
Seagull security officer? Now that's a new one on me. I mean, where do you even start with something like that? Imagine your job description. Must be willing to shoo seagulls without disrupting the captain's morning coffee. And heaven forbid you forget your breadcrumb tactical vest for distraction deployments, right? But seriously, animal interruptions can totally throw a spanner in the works. One moment you're all business, next minute it's like a scene out of Madagascar on deck. Shows us just how unpredictable life can be, even when you think you've got all the techie stuff under lock and key.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens out in podcast land. That's our cue to close the treasure chest on today's wild ocean cyber yarns. Make sure you're back here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern, because we'll be diving into more untamed digital waters where no topic is too big or too small for our rickety raft of a show. Until then, keep your breadcrumbs dry and your coffee cups sealed tight. Thanks for sailing with us today on Infinite Podcast. Drop anchor here tomorrow. You won't want to miss it.